Can you imagine a world devoid of all sound except that of the human speaking voice? Animals, car horns, and even wind makes music. Music is defined as organized sound, so how can we acknowledge music that isn't on the radio? Our society has devalued the art of sound and brought us to a place of emptiness. I would like to bring us back to a time when music was more than MTV, YouTube, and Pandora. And one of the instruments that make this a vital part of our past, present, and future is the recorder. There are two main aspects of the recorder: the types of recorders and how they are played, and the history of the recorder. The recorder consists of multiple pieces and two different keys. This is a soprano in the key of C. This is a tenor, also in the key of C. An alto in the key of F. And a bass in the key of F. The keys are determined by highest to lowest pitch. And for the C, there's a gark line, a soprano, a tenor, a bass, and a subcontrast. For F, there is the sopranino, which is equal to the glarkine, a soprano, a treble, or an alto, a bass, and a contrabass. The keys are usually the lowest note playable, and the pitch the recorder is tuned to, and the fingering is used. The recorder is usually written in the key of C, which is our concert pitch for all music, and the sopranino and the soprano are usually one octave higher written. They play higher. The soprano glarkine plays 2 octaves higher, and then the bass and the subcontra all play an octave lower than what's written. The general ensemble is consistent of the 4 instruments I showed you earlier: the soprano, the alto or treble, the tenor, and the bass. These are also the parts usually in a voice choir. Solo music is usually written for the alto. Sopranos are most widely used, but they don't blend very well. Sopraninos, the ones that are a little bit smaller, are almost never used. And the bass is the hardest to play because it's the largest, and because the finger tone holes are so far apart that unless you have larger hands, they're not played very often. There are 3 sections to the recorder, and I'll explain this to you on the alto. We pull them apart. There's the head joint with a mouthpiece. This is where you place your mouth. The tip here is called a lip. Just like we have lips, it has a lip. This is the window or windway. The middle section is called the body or the barrel. It has tone holes, which we cover our fingers to make the sound. There's the foot joint, which is a bell or bore, which is the shape of the bottom. It has double tone holes in the very last of the bottom, in the middle joint, and the foot joint. And we place those together. Usually recorders have 3 parts, or in today's society when we have plastic ones, they're only 1, such as our general recorder for the classroom today. Come in multiple colors. This one's probably the most popular used. The double tone holes are for chromatic pitches, the bottom, so half notes in between, and the full tones are usually whole tones between, which is based off of our scale, and the way the fingers are placed is how we make different sounds in different pitches. The recorders are usually made out of hardwood, maple, pearwood, rosewood, granilda, boxwood, red cedar, and plastic, which is what we make a lot of them out of today. They are played horizontally, this way, and you hold the recorder with your left hand on top, and you place it on the tone holes. You don't have to place them all when you're playing it. It depends on your fingering, but generally it's going to go thumb, 1, 2, 3, and then with your right hand, there's no tone hole in the back. You're just going to play 1, 2, 3, and then possibly 4. You're going to blow into the top, and if it was on correctly, that would work. You're going to blow, and you're going to give about 1/4 to 1/2 inch, where your lips are going to touch over the mouthpiece, and push them to the top of this, and you're just going to blow air through and it'll make a noise. The tone holes are covered to make sound, as we talked about. The correct fingerings are for tone or half or full. The embouchure, we place the lips on here just like we did before, but we're going to just gently place them on top, but we're going to pull the corners in just a little bit so air doesn't leak out. And that's what's going to make the sound. When you play higher, you're going to tighten your embouchure just a little bit, and when you play lower, you're going to loosen it and use a little more mouthpiece, so you're going to put a little more mouthpiece in your mouth. So if you're playing a low note, which is this, you're going to use a little more mouthpiece so that that tone comes in straight. If you're playing a high note, such as this, one of those, you're going to use just a little bit less, and you're going to tighten your corners up and blow a little more air through. The fingers are a combination of covered tone holes. So if we're going to be looking at the recorder, we have one thumb and 1, B, C, D, E, F, G. And then they go higher. This is a C and a D, and that's usually, we only use about 1 octave if we're teaching it in the schools today. Music's written usually for 2 octaves. The history of the recorder. Early recorders evolved into the noticeable form about the 14th century. We see some different kinds of recorders, but not fully formed before the 11th century. They usually come from pitch pipes or horns, literally from like an animal. They were mostly used in the Renaissance around the 16th century for art music, for nobility, clergy, and professional musicians, but they at this time began to start being more popular with the common person, and people were more easily able to get them. They were used for mostly court dances and to accompany voices. So I have a small processional dance from Renaissance music that I want to read. Recorders were played because of their simplicity. It's not too hard to play a recorder outside of covering the tone holes. A lot of instruments today have more keys, more notes. Each octave is usually a different fingering. And then brass instruments, you have to be able to play the pitch with very limited fingering. So you can play, say, a trumpet or a horn almost completely without using any fingerings at all. Renaissance recorders had cylindrical bores, so they were like a cone at the end, and you use more air in them for playing the low notes. Henry VIII owned 76 recorders and composed music for them, so he was one of the biggest non-composer composers at the time. It's kind of cool. Baroque recorders continued in popularity until the late 17th century. They were more popular with the common man because they were more accessible. They began showing up as the flauto da echi, and before this they were just called the flauto, or the flauto dolce. Baroque recorders had more narrow bores, so they were a little less wide at the bottom, and required less air, but had a clear and pure sound, which is why people today often play Baroque recorders, such as these, in the ensembles that they use now. They are used more often now for symphonic music and opera. Bach, Beethoven, Telemann, and Handel were all leading composers of the recorder. To name others. I have a piece from the Baroque period to play from you. This is Beethoven, Symphony No. 9. Small excerpt from it. Recorders declined in popularity around the 18th century and revived in the 20th century. They just weren't popular at the time. clarinets and flutes were more often used. The recorder was transformed and started to be played to the side, and then they added keys to them. So they would blow into a hole similar to this instead of on the end. It was called flauto transverso. And those became more popular because they were being renovated all the time, and they were fixed. And then clarinets that are played as a recorder would begin to have notes, and they were also being used more widely. So the recorder became obsolete. In the 20th century, early music enthusiasts, people that were crazy about the early music, such as Renaissance and before, mainly medieval music, started to bring the recorder back into popularity and performed this as if the original music was being replicated. So instead of doing like what we do now in the 21st century and play music and try to change it a little and make it more exciting for the listener today with instruments, we use it for the original music and play it the same way the original music was written. So if a recorder was written, there was a recorder written in, and they would play it. Because the recorder fingering size, the tone holes are small and close together, we'll use this plastic one, these, and fairly easy to use, and cheap because they're made of plastic. Today's educational system uses them in the classroom. This is usually the first instrument that is used, besides mallet percussion and drums. To teach students instruments, these are taught in elementary. You start with usually around 5th grade. And I have a short piece from that I'd like to play for you. I think you'll all notice it. Does anyone know what that is? Yep, that's one of the first songs kids learn. More than 3.5 million plastic recorders alone are manufactured annually today, if not more. All styles of music use recorder: jazz, Latin American, pop, rock, folk music, and new age now. Even some techno music will have it. The Beatles, Rolling Stones, Jefferson Airplane, Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix, and Mannheim Steamroller all use recorders. So today we've discussed the two main aspects of recorders. We've talked about the types of recorders and how they're played, and we've talked about the history of the recorder. Recorders are particularly important in today's society, and you've probably played a modern imitation of one, or one day your children will.